Hi everyone.
Yes, hello.
Hi, this is Shilpa here, and I will be giving this session along with Nikhil, who will be continuing the session right after me. So, I think we can get started. Yeah, so the topic for today is, as you can see, introduction to building and securing your CI CD pipelines. Just to start off with a little bit about myself, I work in Accenture as a senior security delivery analyst. I am a CEH certified, and basically, I work on mobile application security, web application security, and DevSecOps. So, if you talk about mobile application security, I would say like primarily it's iOS and then also Android. Uh, to cover the conferences where I have presented, so I have been presenting since last year in OSC sites. I also gave a session this year as well. Yeah, and if you guys would like to connect with me, here is the LinkedIn profile of mine where you can connect with me. Okay. So let's start off with some introduction to DevSecOps. So before we start off with DevSecOps, I think we first need to know what DevOps is. So as you can see, DevOps, it stands for development and operations. So if you take an ideal development cycle, so it starts off with the developers writing their code, and it will not be just a single developer who will be writing the entire code. So there will be a set of developers who will be assigned with the task of developing a product or a software. So what happens is each developer finishes his part of the coding, and all these code uh, use maybe repositories or bases are then uh, put into a single main repository. Okay, now before that happens, this has to go through a series of processes. So here is where the testing comes into picture. So the code will go through some quality testing, maybe security testing, and then finally this will be put into a centralized code repository. So without the security part, if we remove the security part, that consists or that constitutes DevOps. If we add security here, this is nothing but DevSecOps. Okay, so you guys can go through the slides. So I will be just briefly explaining all the concepts here. Okay, so after DevSecOps, some of the common terminologies that we hear is CI and CD. Okay, so what is CI? CI is nothing but continuous integration. Now, as I explained you earlier, that the developer's code will be merged and put into a centralized repository. Now there will be different builds. There will be different. So usually these days, agile flow is followed, right? So there will be different sprints. So there will be something called version control system that will be put into place. So each build will be assigned with a unique name or a number, and some of the tools that allow this is, for example, Git. Okay, so all the code bases are then joined and maintained in a centralized repository system. So how is continuous integration different from continuous? Okay, CD can be either continuous delivery or it can be continuous deployment. Now, maybe in the next slide, I'll show you the difference between continuous integration and continuous deployment. So before that, let's also cover CD part. Okay, so continuous delivery is nothing but as and when the code base is ready, it should be continuously and automatically tested for all the bugs or all the quality checks, and it should be pushed to a central repository. That is nothing but continuous delivery. Now, what is continuous deployment? Once our code is ready, it should be deployed to our maybe productions server or a staging environment. It can be anywhere, but continuously as and when our code is ready, it should be deployed. So this process is called continuous deployment. So to understand this better, maybe you guys can see this diagram. Okay, so the first part is continuous integration, where I build my code. Okay, then it goes through a series of tests. So like I said, there can be code related quality checks. Then the next part will be, there will be some security checks. Okay, then everything will be merged and it will be sent to a centralized repository. So this part is called the continuous delivery. Now, once I have my final code ready, this will be deployed to my production server. Now here there can be another step, there can be a staging environment here where you know a manual intervention can be done, where you see if this build is actually ready to be deployed to my production environment. And then depending on whatever call is taken, it can be automatically deployed to my production. Okay. So usually we deal with all these three concepts in our day-to-day business flow. In this presentation, we'll be basically, at least my part is with respect to continuous integration, and we will be achieving this by using GitLab CI. Okay. So before we start off with the GitLab CI architecture and everything, I thought maybe we could start off with a simple pipeline, and then I will explain going forward how does the architecture work and everything. So before that, let's go to our GitLab. I hope it's visible to everyone, right? Okay, I assume since nobody answered, it is visible. So let's start off by creating a new project here. Okay, so I have my account on gitlab.com. I'm creating a new project. Let's name it as first pipeline. Okay, so it can be a private repository or a public repository. It's okay, doesn't matter. Create project. Okay, let's give some other name. Yep. So this is how we create a new project on GitLab. So here we will have to create a configuration file. Okay, and this file is supposed to have a very specific name. So we will be naming it as .gitlabci.yml. So YML is nothing but it's a configuration file here for GitLab CI, and we will be making use of YAML, YAML language. That's nothing, if you just Google the full form, it says as YAML ain't markup language. Yeah, it's a very simple, readable, a very easily understandable language. Okay, so let's start off by writing the first part of our pipeline. It's a very simple pipeline. So I already have the code here. So let's start off with the first part. So as and when I execute, I will be explaining the code as well. Okay, so here our pipeline will consist of a series of steps, okay, or a series of tasks that will be performed. Now, each task is responsible for a particular uh, thing or a particular job that has to be done. So as I said, so this each task is given the name of a job here. So here, for example, let me tell you what I'm going to do in this pipeline. So let's consider a car. Okay, so I am going to consider that my car I am going to build using three parts, okay, or three components. So that is the chassis, the engine, and the wheels. Okay, now I can't actually construct a car here. So this is just a symbolic, representation. So what I will be doing is I will just be creating a file called car.txt, and I will be echoing three terms, that is chassis, engine, and wheels. Okay, this is my first job. So the name of the job is build the car. Okay, now before writing the contents of my job, we have to include this attribute or this tag called script. Now while creating this configuration file, we have to be very careful regarding the indentation. Okay, so here if you observe, after my job name, that is build the car, next line, here there's the space, right? So please do not make use of your space bar. Okay, you have to make use of tabs. Now, why is it said that you shouldn't make use of space bar? Is usually what happens in different systems. Uh, the space bar is kind of interpreted differently. Okay, so it's usually advised that you may not only advised, it is mandatory that you make use of tabs. Okay, so here I've just given one tab, and then here is my script. Now the first line says make dir build. So make dir is nothing but make directory. So I'm creating a directory called build. Okay, series change directory. I'm going inside my directory, touch car.txt. So what does touch do? Touch is used to create a text file. Okay, and if that text file is already created, it is just going to update the timestamp. Okay, so after that, I am going to add these words chassis, engine, wheels into my car.txt file. Okay, I hope this part is clear to everyone. Okay, I assume it's clear. So I have added the content and I'm going to commit the changes. Yeah, so once I do that, if you see here, the pipeline is already running. So as soon as you commit the changes, you trigger the pipeline, you trigger the flow. So let's click on this. Okay, here, let's click on this, build the car. Okay, so here if you see, it says running with GitLab runner. Okay, fine. And it says using Docker executor with image Ruby 2.5. So whenever you run a pipeline, by default, this is the Docker image that is picked up. Okay, now there is a provision for you to change or to instruct the runner to pick a Docker image of your choice. So as in when we progress, I'll tell you how to do that. Yeah. So this Docker image has been picked up, preparing the environment, getting source from Git repository. Okay, so now the repository that I created had nothing in it, just the configuration file. And the job that we have specified doesn't need any repository as such. So next is downloading artifacts. We don't have anything. Yeah, so coming to the first, make directory, cd build, touch car, okay, echo, running apt script. Okay, so if you see here, it says job succeeded. So this black screen that you see here, which somewhat looks like a terminal, okay, or a command prompt. So this is our GitLab runner. So GitLab runner is the component that actually runs our pipeline. Now, who instructs the GitLab runner to start running the pipeline? So there's something called the GitLab server. Okay, now GitLab server is the one which organizes everything. So GitLab server is the coordinator. It's going to instruct GitLab runner to start running a pipeline. Okay, so this is the first part of our pipeline. Now what we have done is we have created our first job to create our car, or basically just to create a text file, and we have just echoed all those terms there. Now the second part of our job should be to test this. Okay, how will we know if this is working, right? So we also need to add a test job. So let's do that. So I'm going back to my YML file. Okay, let's go back here, test the car. Okay, so I'm editing my configuration file. Okay, so now here if you see, there is an attribute called stage. Okay, so why do we use it? Now previously I just had a single job to run, so then there are no steps or there is no flow involved. But here I'm defining two jobs, so it depends on me whether I want these jobs to run one after the other, or I would like the jobs to run parallelly. Okay, so this key stage is used to specify the order of running of the jobs. So I'll tell you how to define that. Okay. Okay. So here what I'm doing is, so we will have to start off with defining the stages. Okay, so currently my pipeline has two stages, build and test. So I'm assigning the first job with the stage build, and I'm assigning the second job with the stage test. Okay, so let's run this and see what happens. So let's come with the changes. Okay, it says it's failed. Let's see. Okay, it says there's some syntax error. Let's go back. Okay. Okay. So here, if you see, initially we just had a single job, right? So we've added a new job. So I have assigned the first job to the stage build and the second job to the stage test. So here, both the jobs will be executed in a serial fashion, that is one after the other. So let's see what's happening in our first job. Okay, so here as we see, we've run our first job successfully. It says job succeeded. Now, if you click here, it will list out our jobs. So let's go to the next job, that is test. Okay, so here if you see, okay, let's come to this step. It says test-f build car.txt. So if I go back to my code here, let me explain the second part here. Okay, so here what I'm doing is, once I input or add all these terms to my car.txt file, so I am testing this text file. Okay, so I'm changing directory into my build directory, then I am checking the contents of my car.txt and I'm grepping each and every term from my car.txt file. But here, if you see the output, it's failing at test-f build car.txt. It says job failed, exit code 1. Okay, why this fails is because if you see here, the first part of my job is done, car.txt file is created. But what happens is, once a job is completed, so GitLab CI is going to clear all the contents of my first job and my second job is going to start afresh. So when the second job is starting, it's not able to fetch the car.txt file. So that is why our second job is failing here. So for that, what we have to do is, we have to make sure that at the end of our first job, whatever text file is created, we are storing it in one of the directories. And then the second job is able to fetch this file from that directory. So this is achieved by using the attribute called artifact. Okay, so let's add that to our configuration file. Okay, So here what I'm defining is I am saying, or I'm instructing the GitLab runner to save the output of my first job, and I'm asking it to save it within my build folder. Okay, so let's commit the changes. See, okay. So there's some error with our file. Let's go back. Okay, there's some issue with the path here. Let me see.
Shilpa, I can add in here. The path has to
Yeah.
have another indentation with double spaces. No, the
Okay, am I
path,
missing the indentation part here?
yeah, double space.
Okay,
Yeah, and it's not paths. I think it's path.
is it? Let me just check once.
You got to add the colon, right?
Yep, it's working. It is parts, I think. It is parts. So let's finish for the first job to complete, and then we'll go to the second job. So first job is definitely going to succeed since there's no error in that. So this might be a little slow because it has to pull the Docker image and then start executing our script. Okay, so this part is succeeded. Let's go to our next job. Okay, so it says that the job is succeeded. So as you see here, it's able to grep each and every term. So it's able to fetch the term chassis, engine, and wheels. So our pipeline has got executed successfully here. Let's go back to our slide. Okay, so I have kept the GitLab architecture after my first CI pipeline so that it'll be easier for you guys to understand how the flow works. So as I said, there is a GitLab server, okay, The GitLab server is nothing but it's the coordinator, and the server is going to delegate the flow or the task to the GitLab runner. Okay. Now, GitLab runner can either work on your system, that is on your laptop, or it can be used on the GitLab side. Okay, so it depends on your project requirement. Okay, so before this, let me show you. Let's go back. Okay, maybe we'll do that later. Okay, so basically what happens is this GitLab runner is actually scalable. So it depends on your business requirement. So for example, if there are a lot of jobs that have to be executed, a lot of jobs that are a part of your pipeline, then you can add the GitLab runners. And as and when the requirement goes down, the number of runners can be reduced. Okay, so by default, like for example, the pipeline that we created now. So by default, GitLab itself will give you a set of GitLab runners. Now it depends on you. You can add the runners from your side, depending on the requirement of your pipeline, right? Okay. So this was just a basic pipeline that we created, our first pipeline. So moving on, let's create a website and then push it to our GitLab repository. And then let's carry a set of security checks. So as a part of this session, we will be creating a website using Gatsby tool. Once we create this website code, we will be pushing it to our GitLab repository, and there we will be checking for any kind of secrets that might be present in our code using a tool called Git Secrets. Also, we will be checking for source composition analysis kind of vulnerabilities using a tool called OWASP dependency check tool. Okay. So just to go step by step, let's start off with creating a website. So the first step is installing this Gatsby tool. Now you need not have to use Gatsby. Okay, you can create a website however you want. Just for the purpose of this session, I am making use of this Gatsby tool. Right? So first is installing this tool using my NPM. It's already installed on my system. Right? Next is I'm going to create my site. So the name of my site is demo site. So yeah. So let me do this demo side by side. Yes, the terminal. So what this does is, this is going to create a static website. Okay, just a very basic, a simple website. So once that is created, okay, we can, run the server and see if our website is working properly. So that is done by this command, Gatsby develop. Now there are two commands here. There's something called Gatsby develop and there's something called Gatsby build. Now, Gatsby develop is just to run a development server, just to see if it's working properly. For the production build, okay, to be deployed on our production environment, for that, we will be making use of the command called Gatsby build. So it is going to, so what is the difference between this develop and build? It's almost the same. It's just that the final build that we want need not have some redundant files, some CSS, some HTML files will be reduced. So for that, we'll be making use of Gatsby build. So let's see if this one, okay. CD demo site, ls, okay. So these are the files that have been created as part of creating the static website. Okay, so let's run the command. Let's build. So as I was telling you about the Gatsby build part, so this is going to give me the end final build, okay, that is ready to be deployed on my server. I mean, ideally, this is not the case. Our code will go through a series of stages, but again, just for the intent of this session, I'm just creating a build here. So this is my build. Now, once this is ready, I have to push my code to a repository. So I am making use of a GitLab repo here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is on GitLab, I'm going to create a repository called demo site. And then I'm going to push my code to that repository. So for that, let's create a repository first. Okay. So name it site. I'm just going to make it public for now. Let's not initialize, create project. Okay, I think the name has already been taken. Website 2. Okay, so this is the repository that I have created here. Now what we have to do here is, so first we will have to add that remote repository. Okay, once that remote is added, then we are going to push our code to that remote repository. So for that, let's go to our terminal. Okay, so this is my website. Let me do. Okay, so what this says is that everything is fine, that my working branch, it's clean. Okay, done. So next we are going to add our remote. Isn't this our repository demo website? Okay. Okay, I think the previous one got added. Let me know one thing. Git remove Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, I'm just getting a message saying there's something wrong here.
So in the previous comment, there's a slight typing mistake there.
Yeah. So it's already been added, so I have to remove that now.
No, the demo website site.git. So that's
Yeah.
the site has been added extra there. It's not website site, it's rather website.git.
Okay. No, the thing is, even that hasn't got added because my origin has already been set to demo site.
Okay.
See, it says origin already exists.
Yeah.
Okay, how do we remove this? I think it's remove.
Kenapa mau ditipu? Nggak ada yang di broker buat apa orang nggak ada middleman-nya?
Okay, I think there's some issue with this.
Aku ingat banget tuh Mas Oman sampai disindir-sindir. Wah, Mas Oman dapat apa nih? Kok Telkomsel yang dibanyakin? Loh.
Yeah, it's already there.
Ya, ini bukan kita ngapa-ngapa, memang usernya milihnya Telkomsel, Telkomsel yang udah ready.
Aku bilang, kamu tahu di rumah aku tuh mobil tiga dengan Telkomsel itu sama biar puas loh.
Wah, ini orang.
I think Shilpa, you can show them the actual site itself on the GitLab. There is another repository, right? And you could show them that.
Yeah. I just thought if I could do this, the whole flow will be done. Okay, facing some issue there. Yeah, it's yeah. Now this should work. Yep, it's done. So what happened was, by mistake, instead of adding my demo website, I had added demo site. Okay. So since already a remote was added, I was not able to add the correct remote repository. So for that, I had to remove the origin that I had set, and I have added the correct origin here. So the command for that is git remote remove origin. I had missed the remote there. Okay. So this is done. So once this is done, let's do the next thing, that is git push -u origin master. Okay, so what this is going to do is, this is going to push the code that is present in my local repository to my remote repository. Now that repository can have different branches. Okay, so I'm specifying the master branch here. Since I'm just using a single branch there. So this should push my code to that repository. So it's done. Let's go back. Okay, so here if you see initially nothing was present. So I have pushed my code from my local repository to my remote repository. Now from here is when my actual pipeline starts. So now I have the code here in my repository. Now I am going to be, checking for any sensitive information or any keys or tokens present in this code. So that will be done using my Git secrets tool. And also I'm going to be doing an SCA using the OWASP dependency check tool. So let's see one by one. Okay, so just a short introduction to this Git secrets tool. So this can be used to scan the commits, not only the commits, the commit messages, the contents of the commit, okay, to see if any secrets are present in the repository. Now, as a part of my pipeline, I am using this tool post committing, right? But you can, it depends on you, it depends on the configuration. You can also add this as a pre-commit hook. Okay, so this is the first tool that I will be showcasing here. It's a very simple tool. So let's go back, but before going back, I think let's understand the pipeline that I'm going to be using there. Okay, so this is my code, this is the configuration file for the same. So first what I'm going to do is, it's a very simple script. So I'm cloning the git secret tool repository. Okay, this is the GitHub link for the same. Okay, so once that is cloned, okay, there are a few installations that have to be done. Okay, so I'm making use of the make install command. Then after that, again, there are a few plugins that have to be installed with respect to the git secrets. Okay, register AWS. Now also to point out here, so by default, if you use git secrets, okay, like without adding any other configuration or making any changes to the tool, it's only going to scan or check for your Amazon Web Services related secrets or token. Okay, there is a provision to customize that. Okay, you can add your own checks, you can add your own set of passwords or tokens or some regex pattern that it should search for. Okay, that can be done later, but here we're just going to stick to the basic. Okay, so once everything is done, this is the actual command. So git secret scan secret.txt. Now what is this secret.txt? Let me go back to another repository. So this is the repository where I've actually written the code for git secret, right? So here again, I have maintained separate repositories for each tool, but in the end, all of this has to be merged into a single pipeline. Yeah, so here I've just created a file, okay, called secret.txt just to showcase the tool. So inside my secret.txt are some credentials, okay, some access key, secret key have been hard coded here, right? So if, let me open the configuration file, it's the same, whatever I explained earlier. Okay, so I am downloading the git secret repository. Okay, I am making some installations and then I'm going to run the scan on my secret.txt. Okay, let's see what happens. So if you go to CI/CD pipelines, you will get a list of all the previous executions of this pipeline, right? So my latest, whatever I am running right now, it's still in progress. So let's see. Okay, so here if you see, let's go step by step. Okay, the cloning is done. We've changed directory. All the installations is done. Secrets install, register. Okay. So here, if you see, when I'm scanning my secret.txt, so it has found the keys that was hard coded in my file. So that is why my job is failing. Okay. Just because it detected some sensitive information that has made the job, or that has made our pipeline to fail. So this is a very simple pipeline, the basic one. It can be customized. It should be customized because presently we have just, added for the AWS tokens. So you, on top of that, you can, create your own regex pattern. All that customization can be done. Yeah. So let's go back. Okay, so that was the first tool. Okay, now moving on to the OS dependency check tool. So this is again an open source. It is an open source, and this tool has been developed by the OWASP group. And this basically checks for the software composition analysis related vulnerabilities. Because it can make use of certain libraries, certain plugins which are open source, which might also be vulnerable. Okay, so all this data is fetched from the publicly available CVE database. So it's going to compare and match with the present vulnerabilities and list out whatever vulnerabilities have been detected in our code base, right? So again, let's move on to the configuration file for the same. Okay, so here if you see, there is a new attribute called image. Okay, so what does this image stand for? Now earlier when I was showing you the GitLab runner, I showed you that by default, it's pulling the Ruby Docker image, right? And I told you that there is a provision to instruct our GitLab runner to choose an image of our choice. So here I'm instructing the GitLab runner to choose this Docker image, the Alpine Java version. Okay, so why am I doing this? Why am I not letting it use the default version? So for the purpose of downloading my OS dependency check tool and scanning, there was a dependency on Java. Okay, so instead of installing Java and then executing all these steps, it'll be easier if I can just fetch the Docker image which already has Java installed, and then I can execute the remaining steps. So just to simplify the process and save some time, we are going to make use of this Docker image. Okay, after that, again, similar to the git secret thing, we're going to get this zip file, the OS dependency check zip. Okay. After unzipping, we are going to run our command to scan the project. Okay, this is the command. So dependency check.sh project. So we are going to specify. So any name will do here. You're just naming your project. Okay. Then --scan dot --out dot. So scan dot is nothing but my present location. I'm instructing the runner to scan all the files in present location. I'm also instructing it to save the output, whatever is generated in my present location. Okay. Now, after the scan is completed, obviously it's going to generate a report. And now that report has to be saved somewhere. Else, once the pipeline is executed, everything will be cleared, right? So to save that report, I'm going to make use of the artifacts. So I'm instructing the runner to save my artifact within this folder. I hope this is clear. Okay, so let's execute the same here. Okay, the same thing has been defined here, whatever we saw there. Yeah. Okay. Commit changes. Okay. Now this is going to take some time. Okay, this is the Git secret one. I said, wait, let me go to this one, my website thing. Yeah, this is our OWASP dependency check configuration file. Now, as I was saying, this is going to take some time because the first time you download and install your OWASP dependency check tool, it's going to get all the vulnerabilities from the CVE database. Okay, it's going to download that. So that is going to take quite some time. Thanks. Yep. Yeah, so I think it's going to take some time. Let's go back to a slide till then. Okay. So I think all the topics have been covered. Yeah. This is the last part of the GitLab session here. Apart from that, also there are some pointers that I will be adding at the end. Maybe we'll wait for this to finish. As I was saying, it's going to download all the data that is publicly available. Maybe it'll take some more time. Okay, let's go to the additional pointers that I was talking about. So here, first thing is, as we saw that we can configure how we want our jobs to run, either in series or in parallel. So if I go back here to the first pipeline that I created, okay, maybe I'll show you here. Yeah, so this is the first pipeline that we created. So here I defined two stages, the build stage and the test stage. Okay, so the first job, build the car, was assigned to the build stage, and the second job, test the car, was assigned to the test stage. Now what we observed at the end of this was the first job is executed. Once that is done, then the second job is executed. Now if I want to run this in parallel, what I have to do is, whichever jobs I want to be run parallelly, those jobs should be assigned to the same stage. That's it, as simple as that. So if I assign this to build and even the second job to build, then both these jobs will be run parallelly. Yeah, this is the first thing. The second thing is, so sometimes what happens is, it's a business requirement, okay, where we have a set of jobs and a job might fail, okay, but we wouldn't want the pipeline flow to stop. We would want it to continue to the next job. So what you can do in such a case is, there is an attribute called allow failure. Okay, so if you set this attribute to true after whichever job you think might fail and you still need to continue the flow. Okay, if you define this there, so what happens is that job might fail, but still the consecutive jobs the execution continues. Okay, and here I'll have to go back to the previous screen. So in that GitLab configuration file in the top right corner, we saw a green mark, right? A tick mark. So if we define that allow failure attribute, and if some job fails, so that will be shown in orange color. Okay, so that's your clue that some job has failed, but still the execution is in progress, right? So I think this execution is done. Okay, oh, the dependency check tool has been installed. Yeah, and the scanning is also done. Uploading artifacts, job succeeded. So here, so we have learned like how to define or how to instruct the runner to save an artifact. Now, where do we search for it? Where do we view the artifact? So here in the right side, there is an option to download the artifact as well as to browse. So for now, let's just see what is stored. So there is the dependency check folder. Inside that is my bin folder. Yeah, so here are the files. Okay, so this is a report. As of now, I don't think any vulnerabilities might be reported because we created a very simple static website and there's nothing inside. Yeah, there's hardly anything. But basically, this is how the tool works, right? So as part of this pipeline, we have just shown how to carry out the different testing processes, right? But at the end of each testing stage, we will have to analyze the data and all the data will have to be put in a proper reporting structure, right? So all these steps have to be added in a pipeline. Again, this is a very basic fundamental pipeline that we have created here. Yeah, so I think we have covered everything. Yep. You guys have any doubts? You can ask now. Are there no doubts? Okay, hopefully there are no doubts. Fine. Yep. Nikhil, would you want to continue?
Sure, Shilpa. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, this is Nikhil here. So I'll be taking up the second part of the session today. So it's going to be more on the CD part, which is the continuous deployment. And let's look at that. Let me share my screen. Okay. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yeah, Nikhil,
Okay.
it's visible.
Yeah. All right. So let's get started. What we are going to be looking into is the infrastructure as a code platform. Okay. So we'll be looking at how to use these tools like Terraform, and how to sort of spin up instances and how to sort of implement certain security rules and benchmarking principles for certain sort of infrastructures. Okay. So we'll be looking mainly at a tool called as Terraform. Okay. There are a bunch of different set of IAC tool set, but we'll be very specific to Terraforms today. Okay, so this is a bit some details about me. So I'm a security researcher. My areas of interest have always been in application security, mobile security, and quite recently in the DevSecOps space as well. So I've presented at conferences such as Know It to Hack in Paris, WASP AppSec Europe, and KubeCon conference here in India. And I've been an old school bug bounty hunter. I've been listed in the bunch of Hall of Fames like Microsoft, Adobe, Apple, and a couple of other more companies. So currently I'm also researching into machine learning and how we could implement that into information security. Okay, so that's about me. Let's look into the agenda for today, what exactly we'll be working on. So it's going to be a basic introduction on Terraform's IAC, and a couple of basics, Terraform basics. Then we look at the state files, variables, modules, and what are the best practices that we can implement. Okay, so we'll also look at certain parts of the security as well. A much deeper sense of security we could surely get in the upcoming sessions. Where we'll be talking about implementing CIS benchmarks on instances using Terraforms and all of that. So let's look at infrastructure as a code. Okay, so so if we look at infrastructure as a code, there are multiple different set of tool set that are available in today's world. Right from the CloudFormation by Amazon to the Terraforms. Then we have other configuration management tools such as Ansible, Chef, and Puppet. So there is a star mark if you can look here at the Ansible, Chef, and Puppet. It's mainly to sort of differentiate them as a configuration management tool and not more of a IAC tool. Okay, so what exactly would be the major difference between configuration management and the orchestration tool is that they are mainly made to install and henceforth manage the applications on the available servers. But on the other hand, your IAC tools such as Terraform or CloudFormation are mainly as part of the orchestration tools, which are used to provision the infrastructure, to bring up new instances and destroy the infrastructure and all of that. Okay, so why exactly Terraform? So we'll be looking at a couple of reasons why we'll be using Terraform in the demo session as well. But in simple terms, we can all we can say is it has got 100 different set of providers supported. It is free to use and it is easy to learn and easy to integrate with any of the cloud providers that you have got. Okay, so the 100 plus providers and all of that. So you may have questions around what exactly are providers and all, but we'll certainly look as we further move forward. So for this session, for this a demo session, we'll be using this editor called as Atom Editor. You could actually go ahead and download it from atom.io. Okay, so it's a free and open openly available IDE that we can use for Terraforms. Okay, and then setting up an AWS account is kind of important here. A free tier account would also suffice for this. Okay, and what exactly is Terraform? Okay, so I think before this, I think I should be able to sort of show you guys on a couple of other different things. Let me stop sharing here and reshare the thing again. Okay, so couple of things. So we need to have a free AWS Amazon AWS account here first, and also let's look at Terraform as a website. So if you look at Terraform, their documentation itself speaks a lot about their different set of tools that are there, different set of providers, provisioners, and bunch of different available resources that we have. So if you look at providers are nothing but your different cloud providers or your different SaaS platforms. Okay, so you have your Alibaba Cloud, then you have your AWS as well. You also have your Azure. You have your Azure here, and I'm sure you also have your GCP, which is Google Cloud Platform. Okay, so I think it will be somewhere down here. If you look around, yeah, it's somewhere here. Yeah, Google Cloud Platform. So there are a different set of SaaS platforms that could be easily integrated using Terraforms. Okay, so you can actually go ahead and sort of look at these different available providers, and then if we get into one of these, let's say if I go to AWS, it also gives you a clear snippet that you can actually use to sort of spin up instances or spin up different set of resources. Okay, so we'll come back to this again, but let's get back to our slideshow. Okay, so what exactly is Terraform? Okay, so Terraform basically is a framework. It's an open framework where it is used to sort of build and change and even version the infrastructure safely, and also even to destroy it. Okay, once it is not needed. Okay, so it is built by this company called HashiCorp. Okay, it basically works on the concept of configuration files, wherein you specify certain details in those configuration files, on how exactly your infrastructure needs to look and all that. And Terraform as a platform will take care of orchestrating that flow and getting things ready for you. Okay, So why exactly should we use Terraform? One thing is, it's easy to sort of create, update, and destroy the infrastructure elements, such as, as big as your load balancers or big servers, or powerful servers and all of that. It works really well with major cloud services like AWS, Alibaba Cloud, GCP, and Azure. Okay, it also sort of helps you manage, includes like low level components such as compute instances, storage, and networking, and even high level components such as DNS entries, most of the SaaS features, and all of that. Okay, so this also sort of provides like a standardization of environments across the different domains of in an organization. Okay, so what exactly is not a Terraform? I mean, what exactly Terraform is not really be useful for is, it is not a configuration tool. Okay, like your Chef or your Ansible, and all of that. Okay, so it is mainly used for bootstrapping the resources. On the other hand, tools such as Chef, Puppet, and all of that could be used for mainly installation of softwares on machines that are already existing. Okay, so let's look at Terraform basics. Okay, the installation is very super easy. All you can do is you can go to terraform.io/downloads, and you can download the Terraform CLI for your machine, be it Linux or be it Windows, or even for your Mac installation. It's very straightforward to sort of get it installed. And once we have installed it, you should be actually able to see in your terminal when you type in as Terraform. You should be able to see something like this. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I hope you guys are able to see my terminal now. So let's type in Terraform. Okay, so you should be able to see something like this. It would sort of prompt all the different set of commands that it has got, and which you can use and all of that. Okay, so we are not going to be looking at all of these Terraform commands, but we'll be mainly looking at the major ones, which will basically help you to sort of spin up instances or commission a new infrastructure and all of that. Okay, and also even to destroy a particular infrastructure. Okay, so let's do that. Let's first get into desktop Terraform. Okay, so I have got like almost 5 to 6 different set of folders here, or almost 7 different set of folders here. Every folder will have a certain exercise which will help us to sort of understand the Terraform in a better way. Okay, so before that, let's get back to our presentation. Also, the IDE tool that we'll be using is called the Atom Editor. Okay, so this is easily available on the internet. You can actually go ahead and download it. Once you download it, you will have to install a package called as language-terraform. Let's open this. Okay, so once you type in language-terraform, you could be able to sort of install it like any other packages. Okay, since I've already installed it here, I'm getting these options. Okay, so let's close this. So now let's go back to our presentation. So Terraform basics. So what exactly is a Terraform file? So Terraform file is the configuration file where we basically specify, what kind of an infrastructure that we would be needing. Okay, so what we'll actually do here is, in a simple example here, this is our first example code, which we can basically use to sort of bring up an EC2 instance, a simple EC2 instance. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So the extension file for this is usually a .tf extension file. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So if you look at here, under the AWS providers, it basically sort of gives you a straight snippet to sort of go ahead and configure an AWS provider. Okay, so we'll open up our command prompt or our Atom editor. So in this, let's open this up. So in the first one, if you look at this, okay, so what we are going to be basically doing is we're going to type in something called as provider space, you basically give a name for the provider, which is our AWS at this point of time. Okay. And then, your, a bracket would open up and all of that. So since you have installed the language hyphen Terraform, package, if you just type in a provider here, okay, it should be able to sort of give you all these data such as this. Okay, AWS. Okay, so now we can specify the region. I can specify the region and say US hyphen west hyphen 2. Okay, which is a default region, by the way. Okay, so this access key and secret key could be obtained from your IAM. Okay, let's look at how exactly that is done. So in this AWS management console, once you log in, you should be able to see something called as IAM here, which is Identity and Access Management. Okay, so in the users, as you go ahead, so there are a bunch of different users that I've got here. Okay, I could go ahead and add a new user here. So let's name our user as SA4. Okay, so I want our user to basically have an access key ID and a secret key ID for accessing it using CLI or some sort of an AWS API or SDK. Basically, I want to give it a programmatic access. So I'm going to click on giving it a programmatic access. I select the permissions. So I could add this user to a particular group which has a certain set of permissions, or copy a permission from an already existing user. I could do that, and I can basically select whichever user whose permission I need to copy for this. Or I could go ahead and am I audible? Guys, I'm just
Yeah, you're
checking if I'm
audible.
audible. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So coming back to our AWS IAM policies here. So since we are going to be running Terraform using administrative access, let's give him the administrator access here. So let's do that. And if you want to give some sort of tags, you can give that, and then next review it. So you can go ahead and sort of then review it and create the new user. Once you're done creating the new user, you get an access key ID and a secret key. Okay, you can copy these different access key ID and the secret key, and then go ahead and you can paste it right here. Okay, so once you're done, your provider, your AWS provider details, the basic details for AWS provider are taken care. Okay, and then then you specify the resource that you would want to spin up. So in this current scenario, we want to spin up a new AWS instance. Okay, so for that, you can go ahead and type in resource, and you can specify that AWS underscore instance. Okay, you can go ahead and also select whichever you want. Is it for IAM group policy or internet gateway or SSH key and all of that. But for now, I'm just going to be using the instance. Okay, so it's going to be AWS underscore instance, and you can give it a name. Okay, so you can say it as first EC2. Okay, and then once you're done with that, you got to specify the AMI. So AMI is basically an ID that is usually given for every operating system that is being run in that that is usually available in the AWS. Okay, so let me show you how you could actually get to see that AMI. So let's say if I go to an EC2 instance here, let's say if I'm creating an EC2 here, let's say I launch a new instance. Here, while I get to select this different set of operating systems, this is the AMI ID that I usually get to copy. Okay, so this is very unique to that particular operating system that is currently running. Okay, what I can, so since I've already copied it, I do not have to copy it again. So there are no instances currently at this point of time. Okay, and this is the Oregon region, US West. Okay, US West 2. So what I can do is I can add the same AMI ID and what is the instance type that I usually want. Okay, so once I'm done with this, I should be able to go ahead and directly run this particular AWS the Terraform file. Okay, what I'm going to do is basically save this file. Okay, let's go to our terminal. And I think before this, let's look at our presentation first. Okay, how exactly we do this. So very similar to your Git commands, even in Terraforms, you have something called as Terraform init. Okay, so this is basically to sort of initialize the Terraform to basically sort of pull in a couple of plugins and provide for the specific provider that we have given there. Okay. And then once this is done, you could actually execute the template using the command called as Terraform apply. But before we even do the Terraform apply, we got to do something called as Terraform plan. So the reason why Terraform plan is basically used is, it would basically do and check what are all the different set of parameters that are being specified for a given instance, and then accordingly tell, if it is something is totally wrong there, or if something could be changed and all of that, and only then it would basically allow us to provision it. Okay, so let's go back and do this. Okay, so this is tf_1.tf. What I'm going to do is first type in Terraform space init. Okay, so it has initialized. The Terraform has been successfully initialized here. Now I'm going to do Terraform space plan. So once I do this, it kind of gives me all the details about my Terraform, that I've specified, about the instance, that I've specified, what is the AMI that I'm using. If I've not specified any of these details, it's going to basically show that known after apply. Okay, the source destination check and all of that. So all these different parameters get added here, and you get to see them. Okay, and now is the time where we basically go ahead and do Terraform apply. So usually what it'll ask is for you to sort of it asks for a reconfirmation before you could perform this action. So you can do that by typing in yes. Once you're done, it will start commissioning that particular instance that you have specified. So you can see here the AWS instance is getting created. We could go ahead and refresh this just to see, if that is getting created. So if you look at here, the instance state and all of that, it's still pending, right? So it is coming up right now. So it's going to take some time. Usually it'll usually take around 50 seconds. And it says that apply complete. One of the resources has been added. Okay. So once you're done with this, if you do an ls now, you should be able to see another file called as terraform.tf state. So which is a Terraform state file. Okay, so more about Terraform state file we'll look into in the couple of in the next slides, upcoming slides. But for now, if you go ahead and look at this, you have your instance running. Okay, so this is one easy way of spinning up an instance. If you compare it to going ahead and sort of logging into an Amazon AWS account and selecting all the parameters and then spinning up a new instance, it's going to take a lot of time. and this happened within a span of 40 to 50 seconds. Imagine if you would want to sort of commission like a larger number of instances or some sort of an infrastructure. You could be able to sort of use Terraform and sort of spin it up in no time. Okay, so that's the whole purpose. So how do you now destroy your infrastructure? So the way you could destroy it is very simple. Using this command called as Terraform destroy. Okay, so this will destroy only the Terraform, the infrastructure that is built in that particular directory. So we'll learn more about this in the upcoming slides now. So we have already specified, we have already gotten a IAM user with admin privileges, and we got to create a new security group specifically for this training exercises. Okay, so we'll get into this, the second one part, in a couple of minutes. But let's do the next things. So if you look at the authentication that usually happens with respect to Terraforms, there are 4 different variations of how it is done. One is the static credentials, which basically you can add it into your Terraform file itself. Another one is your environment variables. Then you have your shared credentials file, and you can also have your EC2 role. Okay, so so these are 4 different ways of sort of authenticating into AWS using your Terraforms. Okay, so this is a simple code for spinning up an AWS instance, which we already looked. Okay, so providers, we already spoke about it. Okay, so what exactly Terraform providers do, right? So with the Terraform init, it will basically download the associated necessary plugin that are needed for that particular provider. Okay, so let's go ahead and destroy this this infrastructure that we have built. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so it'll again ask us to sort of for reconfirmation, where I'm going to type in as yes. Okay, so it says it is destroying right now. Let's refresh this page. What exactly is happening? So it is basically showing us that it is shutting down. So it says it is terminated already. Okay, so it says the destroy has been complete for now. Okay, so this is like a very simple way to sort of spin up a new instance and even destroy it within no time. Okay, so let's look at resources now. Okay, what exactly are resources and all of that? Okay, so resources are usually the mappings done to an existing service provided by a provider. So when I say a resource, it basically means that let's say if you consider a provider, AWS is a provider for us. Even things like AWS instance is a resource. Your IAM user is a resource, AWS VPC, and a bunch of different set of resources. If you look at the the Terraform file itself, let's create a new resource, and you'll actually get to understand this better. So let's say I do an AWS underscore, you'll get to see these are different resources that are currently available. You can create a new S3 bucket or a KMS alias or a CloudTrail IAM policy and all of that. So all these come as part of the resource, the things that are usually provided by the AWS provider. Okay, so this is one thing, and let's go further. So there is something called as state files. If you remember, there was another file that got created once we were able to run the Terraform apply, right? So that is nothing but a state file. Okay, so the state files are the files that usually contain the state of the infrastructure that is usually created using a TF file. Okay, so this would enable the Terraform to associate the actual resource to the file, to the things that you have specified in the configuration. So now let's go ahead and look at what exactly are these TF state files. Okay, so let's open up another the 1B of uh, Terraform file, or probably we can go to the next one. Okay, cd space 2. So if you look at this, there is something called as a tf underscore user 1.pem file and an ex2.tf. Okay, so let's open up that in our Atom editor. Okay, so this again also allows you to create a new EC2 instance, but this time we are using a key name, a PEM file to sort of use it for later on to get into the the instance. Okay, so how you can easily go ahead and create that is you can go to the key pairs here. Okay, so you can create a new key pair and then download that particular PEM file or the PPK file and then use that. Okay, so for that I've basically taken in the PEM file here and have copied it here in the same directory. Once we are done with this, let's go ahead and run the Terraform. Okay, so once this is done, what we are going to do is Terraform plan again. I'm sure you all remember this. Okay, so now let's do the Terraform apply. So I want to type in yes. Okay, so we have our instance getting created here. Let's go back. So there's a new one that is getting created now. Okay, so now the apply has been complete. The new instance has been added. Okay, so now let's clear this. So if you now look at it, there is a Terraform .tf state file. Okay, so we can go ahead and open this up directly in our Atom editor. Let's open up the Terraform state file. This basically gives you all the details that is very specific to this instance. Okay, so things like what type it is, what is the mode, who is the provider, AMI, ARN. Okay, ARN is a very it's a very unique number that is being given to this particular instance now. Okay, uh, what is the ID, what is the key name that is being associated with this, okay, and all of that. So all these set of details you'll usually get to see in the terraform.tf state file. Okay, so if you're not able to sort of open this file here, you can open this file in the command prompt as well. For that, what we are going to use is terraform space show. So when I do this, I should be able to see all these details that are very specific to this particular instance. Okay, so any doubts that you guys have so far, let me know, or you could ping it in the chat section. I should be able to have a look at it. Any questions or anything as such for now? All right, I assume there's no questions for now. Okay, that's fine. So these are the state files that we are talking about. So when you look at terraforms, there are basically two things to look at. There is something called as a desired state, and there is something called as a current state. Okay, so desired state is basically the configuration that you have mentioned in your Terraform code. Okay, the current state is the actual state that is present in the in the actual instance, in your AWS provider. Okay, so Terraform's main aim is to always ensure that to make the desired state to the current state. Okay, so whatever is there that is being written here in the desired state, to convert that into a current state. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of Terraform. So then we look at something called as Terraform output. Okay, so what really happens is, if you would want to sort of get some details about a particular parameter of an instance, okay, you can basically specify the Terraform output and get that details. Something like bucket domain name is equals to this. So that will also get taken as an input for some other parameter. Okay, so more on this as we move further, we'll be able to look into that. So then we have something called as Terraform variables. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, for now we are only looking at creating and destroying EC2 instances for this session, so that it doesn't really confuse you guys, and so that you can go back home and try it out. Okay, so let's look at this here. Okay, so here if you look at it, again I'm trying to use the same AWS provider, and I'm going to use the AWS instance resource. Okay, so here I'm specifying the instance type and key name as var.key1 and var.instance_t2, right? So how are we able to get this? Is using variables. So the reason why we would usually go with variables is to sort of, if we are using a particular parameter in multiple different set of resources, then it is good to rather than going ahead and changing it all the different set of places, it is always good to write it in one place, and then specify it in one place, and pull it and use it in different multiple places. So in the variables file, let's open this up. So what I'm going to basically specify is variable space ins_t2, or whatever name I would want to give it, and I specify the default is equals to t2.micro. Okay, and for the key one, which the variable, the default, I'm going to give the name as tf_user1. So once I use these variable names here, in the main one, it's going to pretty much look like this. And once I go ahead and execute this, it should be able to sort of seamlessly go ahead and spin up another instance. Okay, for now, let's first delete the instance that we have already created. Okay, so what I'm going to do is Terraform destroy again. So it says it is destroying it. Let's refresh it. So even the other one is shutting down right now. Okay, so I think it would get destroyed now for now. We'll come back to our variables here. Okay, so we'll be using all of these in eventually in the next demo sessions now. Okay, so then we also have something called as Terraform modules, which basically help us to sort of templatize the resources. Okay, so let's say you are using a particular template, particular Terraform file, and you would sort of want to templatize it and sort of go ahead and use it at multiple different places or by multiple different set of people or teams. You can create them as modules and use it. Okay, so the whole concept of module is really interesting and really useful if you would want from a security perspective. Okay, so something like, let's say if you would want to uh, you know uh, bring in the whole concept of CIS benchmark and provision instances with which are hardened by default. You can be able to use modules and then execute it. Okay, so I think once we do the demo, I think it'll be more easier for you guys to understand that. So let's do the demo for that. So let's for that, let's get into I think we'll open up the fifth one itself. Okay, so if you look at the fifth one, okay, so there are a bunch of other things, like your connection, your provisioner, and all of that. I'll come back to that. Okay, so for that, the modules thing also will do it in some time. Okay, so if you look at here, you have your provider, which is very specified as AWS. You have your resources where you have also specified these. So here you are able to specify something called as security groups, and you have specified it as SSH access. Okay, so security groups are nothing but the ports that you're basically opening up for that instance. Okay, so I have specified already a security group here called as an SSH access. Okay, which will open up port number 22, so that so that it becomes a lot more easier for applications or for user to sort of log in via an SSH. Okay, you can create a new security group and add different inbound rules, so that what are the different port ranges that you wanted to open and all of that. Let's say if I select HTTP, the port range opens up for 80, and the source, is it from anywhere or from one particular IP address and all of that. This could be very easily specified here in the create security group. So that is for the creation of security group. So since for SSH access I have given this. Okay, so with all of this done, then we look at something called as provisioner. Okay, so provisioner basically allows us to perform various different actions on this particular instance. Okay, so in this example, if you look at, so we are using a provisioner called as remote execute. Okay, which will allow us to execute commands on this on this instance that we are creating. Okay, so what exactly it will allow us is, so when I say provisional remote exec, and I given the inline array with all of these commands that are present here, it will go ahead and execute these commands one after the other. So what will happen is, inline will have all these commands one after the other, like sudo apt get update. It's going to install the Docker, it's going to start the Docker, enable Docker, and it's going to pull a particular image and then run that image. Okay, so to perform this, we are again going to be going in via using an SSH connection. Okay, and we'll basically given the user as the default username, which is the Ubuntu, and we have also specified the private key here, which is the tf_user1.pem file. Okay, So with this, all of these details and the host, also the host being the actual IP address of that particular instance. So with all of these data that has been provided here, we could be able to sort of come up with a provisioner that will perform this task. Okay. So the whole concept here is, if you look at the CI part of it, which Shilpa had taken, where you are able to sort of finally, once all your tests are complete, you should be able to sort of push the code or push the build into a Docker container. Once that Docker container is ready and up and available in your registry, you should be able to easily pull it and deploy it on a server. Okay, that is what we are trying to do with this scenario here. Let's get into our command prompt. So before that, let's get into our instances here. Okay, so everything is terminated. So let's get into the fifth folder. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and execute this again using Terraform init. Okay, so now once we are done with this, I'm going to do Terraform plan. Okay, so now once we are done with this, I'm going to do Terraform apply. Okay, so when I click on this, and give a confirmation there, so it is going to start creating our new instance here. So if you look at it, it is trying to connect to the remote host via an SSH connection. So it has started with the Docker processing. Okay, so once all this is done, it says the apply has been complete. Okay, so once this is done, in the if you had looked at the command there, right, it will basically says that sudo docker run with the port number as 8080. Okay, with an interactive terminal, and it will basically start running the container for Apache. Okay, so it has pulled the Docker container for Apache and is running this particular container. If everything is working perfectly fine, then if I then it should basically allow me to show the hello world for our usual Apache when I access it. So we are able to see a hello world here. So the whole fundamental concept here is that all we wanted to show here is once your CI part is done and you basically push your build into a Docker container, okay, to run that Docker container, it could be automated, directly using a Terraform. Okay, so instead of doing all the hassle work by going and manually getting into an AWS console and doing all of that. It's way easier to sort of do it this way. So this is one thing. Okay, so now let's look at the modules part. So which is the sixth experiment that I wanted to try. So in this, the modules basically work in this way. So we have given all the details that are very specific to the provider AWS, right? So then we create something called as module, and we give a name for that module, saying create EC2 as a module, and we specify a particular source. Okay, what really happens when we specify a source here? It'll get into that particular directory or that source that we have specified and perform the things that are being present in that particular source. Okay, so for this matter, it is /mod. It is in the mod directory. So let me open this up. Okay, so in the mod directory, we have this file called ex6.tf. All it is saying is resource, AWS instance, and my EC2, and you are specifying the AMI, the instance type, and the key name. Okay, so once you execute this, it should go ahead and easily, once you're calling this function, right, calling this particular Terraform file as a module, it should go ahead and create a new EC2 instance again. Okay, so in the similar way, you can do a module for a lot of different things, right? So for that, one of the examples would be Terraform registry. Okay, so if you go ahead and look at this here, for specifically for security, there are a lot of different modules that are present here. Okay, so there is something called as security group for Alibaba. For AWS, you have your Terraform module, which creates EC2 instance on AWS. These are very simple ones, but there are a couple of custom-made, security specific modules that are present for AWS and any of your, cloud providers. Okay, so let's say if I take up this, how exactly this works. This is the module. It says that module vault. The source is equals to HashiCorp/vault/AWS. Then you specify the version, and you insert the 4 required variables here. Once you're done with that, it should basically go ahead and bring up that instance based on the modules that are being specified. So these are the input variables that are kind of needed to be given, and these are the output parameters that come out. Okay, so in the similar lines, there is also something called as Cloud Craft. Okay, so in this Cloudcraft, it basically allows you to sort of create your own infrastructure. You can basically draw infrastructures very similar to this, or however you would like to create, and then it also allows you to sort of convert these diagrams into .tf or into Terraform files. So once you get that, it becomes even more easier to sort of execute them and get your instances or your infrastructure up and running. Okay, so this was about as a simple concept of implementing Terraforms here. I hope you guys like the session today. The CI part as well as the CD part. The security part of implementing the CI's benchmarks for the instances and for your infrastructure will be taken up in the next upcoming sessions. So any questions, any queries or anything as such, feel free to sort of ask it right away. Any questions for now? All right. Hey, Adi, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah,
Yes.
hi. Sure. So I think we are done with our session today. It was a great
Okay.
experience from our side. So any questions or any queries, that you get, you can sort of direct it to us, and we should be able to answer that. And we'll also sort of mail you uh, the presentations and all the documents that we were to give you.
Hey Nikhil, maybe if someone to ask your question, maybe you can show your email and
Yeah.
that's it. Participant can send your email, ask question by email. That's it.
Okay. Sure. Let me do that.
Okay.
And this is the email address.
Yes.
I posted it in the chat section there. You could
Yes.
either ask us there, or you can ping us anywhere. We are we are just a Google search away. You could find us anywhere you want.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for your session. It's very interesting. Interesting training for today. So
Thank you.
I will share your slide to everyone which attend this online training, and thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And I will provide your record sent by your email, or maybe, and that's it.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you again.
Okay. Sure. I will do that.
Thank you, Adil. Thank you for giving us
Thank
this
you. Thank you.
platform.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you again,
everyone.
Miss.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.